Okay, so we're working on our midterm project, which is the what's in the air, what's in the water themed project. And getting started on, I've actually drawn my image onto my paper by means of a grid. I stretched the paper. I actually stretched it with staples. They work really great. Tape works great. I didn't have any tape, so I used staples. Then I will just pry the staples out and then trim off the edge of the paper, unless I like how the staple holes look. I erased my grid lines before I did any kind of working. Once there's paint and water on the surface, you'll never get your grid lines up. So you got to erase your grid line. Left kind of a faint drawing. And then here's the image that I'm working from. This is my collage, which I may choose to alter later. And so I've strategized that it's probably better for me to work from the back to the front. So I'm not painting the foremost object, which is the fish. I'm going to wait on that and paint it later. And so I'm just painting up to the edges. I don't have any kind of stencil device or masking device. I'm just being careful to paint around the fish. Now, what I have strategized is that this water is very atmospheric. I can paint everything. There doesn't have any white here. I'm leaving light areas, but I can pretty much lay down washes of color and then have my image remain intact. For the sky, it's yellow, orange, got some gray. Well, if I lay down some yellow, that's not going to hurt anything. I can do it over this entire area, and it's not going to hurt anything because the trees are tend to be a little bit darker, so I can just layer that over. So to get that kind of nice atmospheric quality and that wet into wet wash, I'm just going to paint this whole area with tones of red and yellow. Then I'll superimpose the trees over that, and just painting yellow and orange on my paper will not make me lose the trees. The trees are still there. I have a contour line that roughly defines them, so I know I'll be able to find them when I need to. But I want to just keep overlaying washes in a general sense to create this nice atmosphere, and and it would be like a series of puddles that you keep layering on top of one another to create that overall sense. So, for instance, this blue here, which I've painted a couple layers over already, it's not just one layer, it's like a couple layers, wet into wet. Um, and then also with individual little puddles that I'm kind of slowly adjusting to make it go from light to dark. So you might do this in a few tries as opposed to try to just do it all in one try. Um, and then in the process, I started to define the car in wet paint so that it has a softness, kind of out of focus softness to it. But then I can go back and elaborate on it. So that's where it stands right now. So now I want to start on the sky and keeping my source material handy so I can look at it, but I'm not too concerned. Um, and I'm going to mix up a bunch of yellow, and I'm going to use that yellow foundation, and I'm just going to start layering it on the page. And and I can work into this yellow with other colors. The yellow is kind of the lightest. There's yellow, then there's orange, and it's easier to put the yellow down first and paint the orange into the yellow. There's even pink and there's gray, but it's a warm pink and warm gray, so the yellow won't hurt that either. So I'm just kind of laying in the yellow, and I'm kind of roughly following some of the forms that are there. But I can bring the right into the trees, right into the landscape, and it's not going to hurt a thing. In fact, hopefully it creates more continuity. you know, letting the colors connect in some way. Like rather than painting it like, you don't want to do paint by numbers where you're just painting a little section and painting a little section, you know, paint the whole and let the colors kind of mix with one another. Okay. And this is done quickly so that this is kind of a warm yellow I'm using, not a cold yellow, not a cool yellow. And my pencil lines still show through nicely. And this will, you know, having a little bit of yellow in some of these other colors too, even if they don't ultimately end up as strictly yellow, it reinforces that overall sense of light that you're getting, even though it's a made up landscape. You know, it's nice to have some sort of representation going on there. And there's even, I see some orange, yellow orange in the water reflected. So I can bring it down here into the water even, and it's not going to hurt anything. There, so now I'm going to go mix some red and then bring the red into the yellow, and I'm drawing more specifically or painting more specifically in such a way where I see more evidence of that, of the red. And I'll do this with the red, and then I'll do it ultimately with the gray too. There's a lot of red in this. It's sort of purpley up here, but there's a lot of red in it anyway. Obviously, where the paint gets really dark, you know, you can layer a lot of color on top of that. And then, you know, just continue it down here just for consistency. So then go to, there's this kind of billowy smoke. That's good, a good kind of dividing line. I can treat the billowy smoke in the same way, but just at a different time. So then I can kind of focus more on elaborating these areas while they're still wet. And the smoke has, you know, where the smoke is concentrated, there seems to be more red. So that's where I'm concentrating my paint. And then this is already down below the tree line, but, you know, put a little bit in there. There's some stones on the shore of the lake that probably shouldn't become a darker color because they're kind of highlighted. So I can blot that away. And yeah, there's a kind of orange aspect to this color up here. So bringing a little red in there, and it's just naturally mixing. If I wanted to go more gray, then I can just do a wash over it later to neutralize it a little bit. But there's nothing wrong, I think, initially with just kind of bringing that more saturated color in there. There, now I'm going to pause the video for a moment and then, you know, kind of work a while longer, and then I'll bring it back so then the video will be shorter, but you kind of get the general sense. So I'm doing the same thing up here that I did down here. And my next approach, I think, will be in dealing with this column of smoke. And I'll pretty much do the same thing that I did with laying down the yellow to start with. And the yellow probably could become more saturated or intense with a second wash or second layering, but I want it to have more depth to it. So I'm going to do a layer over that so that the puddles will kind of be different. There'll be more puddles and it'll have a kind of a denser quality. All right. Okay, so I'm incorporating gray now um, into this sky. So I'm trying to work into wet pigment and just basically following this pattern of the billowy clouds. And I'm assuming it's not going to be exactly like the photograph, but it's going to kind of be in character with the photograph. And so painting the gray into this yellow, yellow, orange, it mixes and it looks, it looks more, I believe anyway, it looks more effective. It looks more like, looks more organic, like what the actual thing is. Like I'm trying to let the water work for me. It's, so it sort of becomes like or cloud-like, as opposed to me rendering a cloud. I'm going to put the paint on in a way that is cloud-like. And that's the point I wanted to make. And and if I want to steer it towards more distinct representation in subsequent stages, I can. But this is, this is getting me, I think, a long way without having to do so much work. Well, the desired result without so much labor. Grays. And then some of the places I'm kind of dissolving edges like that. Realized my artwork was off the camera, off the picture plane there. Okay, so this is beginning of a cloud. And then some more darks. And the thing about this puddling business is that you have to be relatively patient and just let it run its course. So I just have to, there's nothing I can do to make this dry quicker. I just have to let it dry. But that will, if I let it dry, then I think it's going to be more effective. So it's going to take up a little bit here where I know I want this to be a little bit more pinkish. So remove, whoops. Oh, darn. It's ruined. There. Okay, and then over here, I'm going to try to define, it's dried a little bit more. I want to take out a little bit of color there. Blot the brush. And then I want to bring in more saturated yellow right along this edge here. This is going to be an edge of a more pinkish cloud. So I want to get the yellow super intense, yellow, orange super intense right in here. Okay. And just going to bring some wash, a little more yellow wash in here, just to get the color a little bit more intense. And then I have to keep reminding myself I can do, I don't have to do it all once. I can let it dry and see what happens. There. Anyway, um, I want that strong color to be present there right along the tree line because I can't paint it in between the trees. Once I paint the trees are just the trees. So I gotta to get in there now. So I'm kind of focusing on getting more distinct colors where right where the trees are going to be kind of meeting the sky there. And then when I'm done with this, then I can go and revisit the water a little bit. Or actually there's water here, which is lakeside. So I just have to let that dry, but I think that's going to be where I go next. Okay, so I have the sky, kind of the initial wash in the sky, have it kind of laid out. And now I have to allow that to dry so I can layer over it. And I'm pretty happy with that. And what I'm trying to do is I'm trying to allow the paint to do the work for me. Rather than render everything, the paint can I can insinuate all those details with the paint. And I feel like the more active the surface of the painting is, the less I have to do details. The paint will imply the details. And that's a strategy here, just let the paint suggest that there's a branch on a tree or a puffy part of a cloud rather than me having to render a puffy cloud. So that's especially the approach with wet into wet. So now I'm going to go back to the water and I'm going to try to continue to define this old wrecked car. And I'm alternating a couple of blues, ultramarine and cobalt blue, and I'm sorry, manganese blue, which is an aqua blue, and then cobalt blue, which is slightly more purpley blue. And so I want the car to be visible, but not, not too distinct. It has to be that kind of fuzzy, has to have that fuzzy out of focus look. And then it's encrusted with, some kind of shell creature. So it's okay if my line's a little bit wobbly because it's a very irregular surface. So I'm bringing in a wash there just to define the profile of the car. And then I'm just going to kind of pull it up and away from the edge of the car and just kind of let it naturally puddle. In the background there. And I can, I can still also do like a darker wash there with the cobalt blue, just to show how it's, getting deeper and murkier in the distance. So then, and checking this out here. This is the open hood and the engine block is down there. I'm just trying to show how it's vague, it's vaguely described, but it's not super literal. So I'm doing these little kind of dots and dashes to suggest the kind of textured surface of the of the surface, which is so encrusted. And then there's a dark in here. I'm gonna mix a little brown in with the blue to neutralize it, to make it deeper. And there's a inside the cab, there's some dark there. So I'm just kind of identifying that. Steering wheel, and then the kind of the side window with the water showing through. So just, you know, you go back and you pick out these little details. Just to bring more information into it. I kind of don't like this color right now. It's too blue. I want it to be more yellowy, so I'm just going to pick up a little bit of the color. Maybe dissolve it a little bit. There. That's better already. And there's this kind of, there's this yellow ochre that it almost gets greenish here, so incorporate a little bit of that color in there, and seems to get more yellowy green as within the shadows. Then along here, just using my brush to kind of texture. And this sort of thing, you can spend a lot of time fussing around with this, and sometimes it yields really good results, and sometimes not. But it's kind of a succession of layered washes that you keep going through until you feel like you've got it to the place where you want it to be. I'm happy with the colors, how that the greenish brown starts to come into play. There. And then parts of it just sort of disappear because it's in the water, just sort of, you just don't see it. So I don't want it to get too distinct. Um, and then see what that's like. And I feel like I've potentially made this too dark. I'm just going to remove a little bit. Dissolve it. Kind of dissolve it and then reassess a little bit. For now. And then this will be a fun part, doing the wheel well of the car. I want to get it just a little darker than it is. So just going over that with a dark. I want to define the wheel a little bit better. like the car's turning a little bit. And then there's a shadow down here. Yeah, definitely lost and found edges is I think the way to go if I want it to have that mysterious quality, that submerged quality. There, and then let it dry and see, see what else is necessary. There's a steering wheel. And then I just I want to be patient. Be patient with the process, and I'll let this dry so that I can really see what's going on. And then maybe it's time to go back to the sky. The sky looks almost dry. So I could do that, or I could go to actually the trees. Like I want to do more sky before I want to do trees. And I could start to maybe block in the fish as well. So I think this is a good time to end the demonstration. You kind of see how one moves through the picture, just trying to keep it adjusted. So, it is worth doing a little bit on the fish at some point, but it's kind of like the dessert. You want to save it for last, but you still want to evolve it somewhat so that it doesn't look alien to the rest of the image. And one other thing I wanted to mention, this paper is, because I stretched it, it's behaving beautifully. It gets getting a little bit bubbly, of course, because I put so much water on it, but then it doesn't do it nearly as much as it would if it were unstretched. And then when it dries, it just goes back to being really beautifully smooth, and it's just kind of a pleasure to work on it. So yeah, we'll see what happens. But this is end of this demonstration, and then I'll do another one again the following day when the picture's a little bit farther along.